She begged the Mafia boss to hide her from her billionaire husband, knowing he had every reason to refuse. Instead, he risked his entire empire to protect her and fell in love with the woman her husband had tried to destroy. The rain hit like bullets against the cobblestone streets of Brooklyn's Red Hook district. Eva Steele ran barefoot through the storm, her $1,000 Valentino gown torn at the hem, dragging through puddles that soaked the silk to her knees. Her perfectly styled hair, the kind that took 3 hours and cost more than most people's rent, hung in wet tangles around her face. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, mixing with rain and tears. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stop. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness, Jonathan would be searching. He always found her. Every single time she'd tried to run in the past 5 years, he'd found her within hours. But tonight was different. Tonight, she'd seen something in his eyes that terrified her more than his fists ever had, a cold, final decision. Like he'd grown tired of the game. Her bare feet slapped against wet concrete as she turned down an alley, her lungs burning. She had no phone, no money. Jonathan controlled everything, her credit cards, her car, even her own family who'd long ago chosen his wealth over her bruises. She'd grabbed nothing but the slim hope that maybe, just maybe, someone in this city would help her. The alley opened into a quiet street lined with old warehouses. Most sat dark and abandoned, but one building ahead glowed with warm light from its second-floor windows. A black Mercedes was parked outside, raindrops dancing across its pristine hood. 2 men in dark suits stood by the entrance, smoking despite the downpour. Eva's heart hammered. She recognized this place from the society pages, from whispered conversations at charity galas. This was Riccardo Vitale's headquarters, the man who controlled half of Brooklyn's underground and had somehow managed to stay untouchable by both police and politicians. The same man her husband had publicly humiliated 2 years ago. Jonathan had done it at the mayor's charity ball, in front of 300 of New York's elite. Riccardo had bid on a vintage wine collection, and Jonathan had swooped in at the last second, outbidding him by $2 million just to laugh in his face. "Stick to what you know, Vitale," Jonathan had said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Wine appreciation is for people with class." The room had gone silent. Riccardo had simply smiled, nodded once, and walked away. But Eva had seen his eyes. She'd seen the promise of retribution there. Now, standing in the rain outside his door, she realized this was insane. Riccardo Vitale had every reason to hate anyone named Steele. He'd probably laugh and hand her right back to Jonathan. But she was out of options. Thunder cracked overhead as Eva stumbled toward the entrance. The 2 guards spotted her immediately, their hands moving toward their jackets. She must have looked like a ghost, a drowned, desperate ghost in a ruined designer gown. "I need to see Riccardo Vitale," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Please." "I need." "Lady, you lost?" one guard said, his Brooklyn accent thick. He looked her up and down, confusion crossing his weathered face. "This ain't no shelter." "I know who he is," Eva said, stepping closer despite her trembling legs. "I know what he does. And I need his help." The second guard, younger with sharp eyes, suddenly recognized her. "Holy shit, you're Eva Steele," she finished, raising her chin despite the tears still streaming down her face. "And I'm begging you to let me see him." The guards exchanged glances. The older one pulled out a phone, turning slightly away as he made a quick call. Eva swayed on her feet, adrenaline beginning to fade and leaving only bone-deep exhaustion and pain. Her ribs ached where Jonathan had kicked her. Her wrist throbbed where he'd twisted it behind her back. "Boss says bring her up," the guard said, pocketing his phone. His expression had shifted from suspicion to something almost like pity. "Can you walk?" Eva nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. The younger guard opened the door, and she stepped into a dimly lit hallway that smelled of cigars and old wood. They led her to an elevator, its interior surprisingly elegant with polished brass and a red carpet. The ride up felt endless. Eva caught her reflection in the brass doors. She looked like she'd been in a war. A dark bruise was already forming on her left cheekbone. Her arms were covered in fingerprint bruises, some fresh, some yellowing from days before. The elevator dinged. The doors opened into a spacious office that looked more like a gentleman's study than a crime boss's headquarters. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, shelves lined with books. A massive desk sat at the far end, and behind it stood Riccardo Vitali. He was younger than Eva expected, maybe 40, with dark hair graying at the temples and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore an expensive suit without a tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He'd been reading something when they entered, but now he set the papers down slowly, his gaze moving from the guards to Eva. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Riccardo studied her with an expression Eva couldn't read. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. Recognition. Not just of who she was, but of what she was running from. "Leave us," he said quietly to the guards. "Boss, are you sure?" "Leave us." The guards retreated into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft chime, and Eva found herself alone with one of the most dangerous men in New York. Her legs finally gave out. She collapsed to her knees on his expensive carpet, her ruined gown pooling around her like a silk puddle. She couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see disgust or amusement in his eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't send me back. I'll do anything. Work for you, clean your floors, I don't care. Just please don't send me back to him." Silence stretched between them. Eva squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for rejection, for mockery, for him to call her husband and collect whatever reward Jonathan would offer. Instead, she heard footsteps. Riccardo circled around his desk, his expensive shoes appearing in her line of vision. He crouched down slowly until he was at her level. "Look at me, Mrs. Steele." Eva forced herself to meet his eyes. Up close, they were dark brown, almost black, and filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Did your husband do this to you?" he asked, his voice soft but edged with something dangerous. Eva nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Riccardo's jaw tightened. He stood, offering her his hand. "Get up." She took it, his grip steady and warm as he pulled her to her feet. He guided her to a leather chair by an unlit fireplace and draped his suit jacket over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body and smelled like expensive cologne and cedar. "You have to understand what you're asking," Riccardo said, moving to a bar cart and pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. "Your husband is one of the most powerful men in this city. Helping you means declaring war on him. On his lawyers, his politicians, his money," he turned back to her, holding out 1 glass. "On everything he controls." Eva's hand shook as she accepted the drink. I know who he is," she met Riccardo's eyes again. "But I also know who you are. And right now, you're the only person in this entire city with enough power to tell him no." Something flickered across Riccardo's face. Respect, maybe, or surprise that she understood the game being played. "He'll come for you," Riccardo said quietly, "with everything he has." "I know," Eva whispered. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come here. Her voice broke. "I had nowhere else to go." Riccardo studied her for another long moment, his expression unreadable. Eva prepared herself for rejection, for him to make a phone call and end this before it even began. Instead, he drained his glass in 1 swallow and set it down with a decisive click. "You can stay," he said simply. Eva's breath caught. "What?" "You can stay," Riccardo repeated, his voice firm. "No one lays a hand on a woman under my roof. Not your husband. Not anyone. But the war. Let him bring it," Riccardo said, and there was steel in his voice now. Cold, unshakable steel. "I've been waiting 2 years to settle accounts with Jonathan Steele anyway. He just gave me the perfect reason." Eva stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing.
"Why?
Why would you risk everything for me? You don't even know me." Riccardo walked to the window overlooking the rain-soaked street. Your husband humiliated me in front of 300 people and thought he could get away with it because he has money and I have blood on my hands. He turned back to her, his eyes hard. But right now, looking at you, I see exactly what kind of man he really is. The kind who hides behind expensive suits and charitable donations while beating his wife behind closed doors. He crossed the room and stood before her again. So yes, Mrs. Steele, I'll protect you. Not because I'm a good man, I'm not. But because I won't let him win. Not again. Eva felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of relief, of hope, of the sudden, overwhelming realization that maybe, just maybe, she might actually survive this. Thank you, she breathed. Thank you. Ricardo nodded once, then moved toward his desk and pressed a button on his phone. Maria, prepare the East guest room. We have a visitor who'll be staying indefinitely. He paused, his eyes finding Eva's again. And call the council. Emergency meeting. Tonight. As he ended the call, Eva realized what she'd just done. She'd sought refuge with a mafia boss, dragging him into a war with one of America's wealthiest men. And somehow, impossibly, he'd said yes. Outside, thunder rumbled like a warning. The storm was only beginning. The council arrived within the hour, summoned from their homes and clubs across the city. Eva had been moved to a guest room upstairs, tended to by Maria, a stern woman in her 60s who'd clucked her tongue at every bruise while wrapping Eva's swollen wrist and bringing her clean clothes. Now Eva sat alone, wearing borrowed sweatpants and a t-shirt, listening to the rumble of male voices rising from the floor below. In Ricardo's office, 6 men sat around a mahogany conference table that had witnessed countless strategy sessions, territory negotiations, and occasionally, sentences of death. These weren't street thugs. They were Ricardo's inner circle, the men who'd helped him build an empire that stretched from Brooklyn to Queens, from legitimate businesses to operations the IRS would never find. Tommy, the accountant, Russo spoke first, his wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the lamplight. At 55, he was the oldest and most cautious of the group. Boss, with all due respect, have you lost your mind? Ricardo leaned back in his chair at the head of the table, his fingers steepled. Elaborate. Eva Steele. Tommy gestured toward the ceiling, toward where Eva waited. Jonathan Steele's wife. You just declared war on one of the wealthiest men in America because a pretty woman showed up crying in the rain. Watch your tone, Ricardo said softly, but there was warning in it. Vincent Caruso, Ricardo's head of security, jumped in. He was younger, built like a boxer, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. Tommy's right to be concerned, boss. Steele has connections we can't touch. Federal judges, senators, the goddamn police commissioner plays golf with him every Sunday. And you think I don't know this? Ricardo asked calmly. Then why? Marco DeLuca, who handled their legitimate construction businesses, leaned forward. Why risk everything we've built for a woman you don't even know? She could be bait. Steele could have sent her here to get leverage on you. Ricardo's eyes narrowed dangerously. You think a man beats his wife until she can barely stand, then sends her running through a storm to my door as some kind of scheme? I think men like Jonathan Steele don't play fair, Tommy interjected. I think he humiliated you 2 years ago, and now his wife conveniently appears asking for protection. It's too neat, boss. Too perfect. Look at this. Ricardo pulled out his phone and swiped through photos he'd taken of Eva's injuries before Maria had treated her. He slid the phone across the table. Tell me that's an act. The men passed the phone around. Even these hardened criminals, men who'd seen violence in every form, looked uncomfortable. The bruises on Eva's arms were clearly finger-shaped. The mark on her cheekbone was fresh and angry. Her wrist was swollen to twice its normal size.
Jesus, Vincent Mutteret.
That bastard, Marco added quietly. But Tommy wasn't swayed. It's terrible, boss. It really is. But it's not our problem. We send her to a women's shelter. We give her money, set her up somewhere safe. We don't paint a target on our backs. She came to me, Ricardo said, his voice hard as iron. To my door. Under my protection. And I don't turn away women who need help. Even when helping them could destroy everything? Tommy challenged. Steele won't let this go. He'll come at us with everything: lawyers, cops, probably the FBI. He'll freeze our assets, audit our businesses, dig into every corner of our operations until he finds something to bury us with. Let him try. The room fell silent. The other council members exchanged worried glances. Frank Moretti, who'd been quiet until now, finally spoke. He was Ricardo's oldest friend, the one who'd been there since the beginning. Rico, we've been through wars before. We've fought off families twice our size. We've survived federal investigations. We've clawed our way to the top of this city. But we did it smart. We picked our battles. And you don't think this is worth fighting for? I think you're making this personal, Frank said carefully. Because he disrespected you at that charity ball. But mixing personal grudges with business? That's how empires fall. Ricardo stood slowly, his chair scraping against hardwood. He walked to the window, looking out at the Brooklyn streets he'd controlled for 15 years. Rain still fell, softer now, painting the glass with streaks that blurred the city lights. You're right, he said finally. It is personal. That son of a bitch stood in front of 300 people and treated me like gutter trash. Like I was nothing. And I smiled and walked away, because that's what you do in society. You play the gentleman. He turned back to face his counsel. But you know what I realized tonight? Men like Jonathan Steele only respect power when it's wrapped in money and expensive suits. They think they can do whatever they want, humiliate whoever they want, hurt whoever they want, because they've got politicians in their pockets and lawyers on speed dial. Boss, Tommy started. I'm not finished. Ricardo's voice cut through the room like a blade. That woman upstairs? She's not bait. She's terrified. She ran barefoot through a storm because she was more afraid of her own husband than she was of me. Think about that. More afraid of a billionaire in a mansion than a crime boss in Brooklyn. He moved back to the table, placing his hands flat on the polished surface. And you want me to send her back? To send her to a shelter where his lawyers will find her in hours? To abandon her because it's inconvenient for business? It's not about convenience, Tommy argued. It's about survival. Our survival. No, Ricardo's voice dropped to something cold and final. It's about who we are. You think I built this empire just to bow down to men like Steele? You think I clawed my way up from nothing just to be afraid of some billionaire who beats women? He straightened, looking each man in the eye. I'm not sending her back. Not to him. Not to anyone. Eva Steele stays under my protection, and if Jonathan wants war, then we give him war. Rico, please, Frank tried. This isn't a debate, Ricardo said, his tone brooking no argument. It's a decision.
My decision.
Anyone who has a problem with it can walk out that door right now. The silence that followed was deafening. The council members looked at each other, years of loyalty warring with legitimate fear of what was coming. Tommy shook his head, his jaw tight. Vincent stared at the table. Marco rubbed his face with both hands. But nobody moved toward the door. You're betting everything on this, Tommy said finally. You know that, right? Everything we've built. I know exactly what I'm betting, Ricardo replied. And I know what I'm fighting for. Something more important than money or territory or power, he paused. I'm fighting to prove that men like Jonathan Steele don't get to win just because they have billions in the bank. Frank stood slowly, his expression a mix of resignation and respect. Then we fight. But we do it smart. We prepare for everything he's going to throw at us. Agreed, Ricardo said. Vincent, I want security doubled. Cameras on every entrance, guards in rotation. Nobody gets near this building without us knowing. On it, boss. Tommy, start moving our more vulnerable assets. Anything Steele's lawyers could easily freeze, shift it tonight. Tommy nodded grimly. I'll make the calls. Marco, reach out to our contacts in the police department. I want to know the second Steele files a missing person report or tries to get a warrant. Consider it done. Ricardo looked at each of them. Gentlemen, I won't lie to you. This is going to get ugly. Steele will come at us with everything he has. but we've survived worse, and we'll survive this. As the council filed out, still muttering concerns among themselves, Frank lingered behind. He waited until they were alone before speaking. "You really care about her," he said quietly. "This isn't just about Steele, is it?" Ricardo turned back to the window. "I saw something in her eyes tonight, Frank. Something I recognized. Fear, yes. But underneath that?
Strength.
The kind of strength it takes to run toward danger, because you know it's your only chance at survival. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now." Ricardo's reflection in the glass looked tired suddenly. "Ask me again in a week." Frank nodded and headed for the door. "For what it's worth, boss. I hope you're right about her. Because if you're wrong, this city's going to burn." After he left, Ricardo stood alone in his office, listening to the rain and wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Or the most important decision. Eva couldn't sleep. The guest room was beautiful, cream-colored walls, a four-poster bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, a view of the Brooklyn Bridge lit up against the night sky. It was the nicest room she'd stayed in since leaving Jonathan's penthouse, yet she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the door to burst open. Waiting for Jonathan to find her. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and padded quietly into the hallway. The building was silent except for the hum of security cameras and the distant murmur of guards changing shifts. She found herself drawn to the warm light still glowing from Ricardo's office. The door was ajar. She peeked inside and saw him sitting in one of the leather chairs by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring into the flames he'd finally lit. He'd removed his jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves. He looked tired, human. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without looking at her. Eva jumped.
I'm sorry.
"I didn't mean to." "Come in," he gestured to the chair across from him. "You're not a prisoner here, Mrs. Steele. You can move freely." She entered slowly, clutching the blanket tighter. "It's Eva. Just Eva." "Eva," then he poured another glass of whiskey and offered it to her.
Sit.
"Please." She settled into the chair, accepting the glass with trembling hands. The fire warmed her face, but she couldn't seem to stop shaking. It wasn't from cold. "They hate me," she said quietly. "Your council. They think I'm going to destroy everything you've built. They're cautious. It's what keeps us alive." Ricardo studied her over the rim of his glass. "But they'll come around. Will they?" Eva laughed bitterly. "I wouldn't. If I were them, I'd throw me out before I brought the whole empire down." "Then it's good you're not them." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. Eva took a sip of whiskey, wincing at the burn. She wasn't much of a drinker. Jonathan had always controlled that too, carefully measuring what she could have at parties, ensuring she never got drunk enough to say something embarrassing. "Can I ask you something?" Ricardo said, his voice gentle. "What finally made you run? Tonight, specifically?" Eva's fingers tightened around the glass. She'd known this question was coming.
He was planning something.
"I heard him on the phone with his lawyer, talking about options. Ways to handle me quietly. I think he was going to have me committed." Ricardo's jaw clenched. "Committed? To where?" "Some private facility upstate. The kind where wealthy families send their inconvenient relatives." Eva's voice cracked. "He told his lawyer I was becoming unstable, that I'd tried to hurt myself. All lies, but who would believe me? Jonathan Steele, pillar of the community, worried about his troubled wife? They'd lock me up and throw away the key. Jesus. So I ran." Eva wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I waited until he left for a business dinner, smashed my own jewelry box, and slipped out through the service entrance while his security team was changing shifts. I knew I had maybe 2 hours before he noticed." She looked down at her hands, at the fading bruises on her wrists. "I've tried to leave before. 4 times in 5 years. He always found me, dragged me back, punished me." "How did you end up with him in the first place?" Ricardo asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Eva smiled sadly. "I was 22. beautiful, naive, from a middle-class family in Connecticut that suddenly had money problems. Jonathan was 40, handsome, charming, rich beyond imagination. He pursued me like I was the only woman in the world. She paused. My parents were thrilled. They saw him as our family's salvation. Let me guess. He paid off their debts. Every last penny. And in return, I became his. Not his wife. His possession. Eva's voice grew hollow. For the first year, it was perfect. He showered me with gifts, diamonds, designer clothes, exotic vacations. I thought I was living a fairy tale. Then I got comfortable. Started having opinions. Questioned why I couldn't have my own credit card or see my college friends. That's when it started. Eva nodded. The first time he hit me, I was so shocked I didn't even process it. He apologized, cried, bought me a sapphire necklace worth more than my parents' house. Said it would never happen again. She laughed bitterly. It happened again 3 days later. And then again. And again. She stood abruptly, moving to the window, unable to sit still with the memories flooding back. He was careful. Always places clothes could cover. Always when we were alone. To the outside world. We were the perfect couple. Jonathan Steele and his gorgeous young wife. Fixtures at every charity gala. Every society event. A doll in a glass box, Ricardo said quietly. Eva turned to look at him, surprised he understood.
Yes, exactly that.
He dressed me, posed me, showed me off. But if I ever acted like a real person, if I smiled at the wrong man, said the wrong thing, showed any independence, he'd punish me later. Always later, when the guests were gone and the cameras were off. She hugged herself, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. I've been nothing more than a doll in a glass box. Beautiful, expensive, breakable. And when he got tired of me, he was ready to pack me away somewhere I'd never be seen again. Ricardo set down his glass and stood, moving toward her. Eva instinctively flinched, years of conditioning making her expect violence. But he stopped a respectful distance away, his hands visible and non-threatening. Look at me, Eva. She forced herself to meet his eyes. You are not a doll, Ricardo said, his voice firm and unwavering. You are not a possession. You are not something to be displayed or discarded when it's convenient. That's all I've been for 5 years. No. He stepped closer, still careful not to touch her. That's what he tried to make you. But the woman who ran through a storm, who had the courage to knock on my door knowing I had every reason to hate her husband, that woman is not a doll. That's a survivor. Eva felt tears streaming down her face. I don't feel like a survivor. I feel broken. Broken glass can cut, Ricardo said softly. Never forget that. You're stronger than you think. Why? Eva whispered. Why do you care? You don't know me. I'm just Jonathan Steele's problem. Ricardo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. My mother, he said finally. She stayed with my father for 20 years. He wasn't wealthy like Jonathan, just mean. Just cruel. She stayed because she thought she had nowhere else to go, no one who would help her. Eva's breath caught. I was 15 when she finally left, Ricardo continued, his voice rough with old pain. She showed up at my uncle's house in the middle of the night, beaten so badly she couldn't see out of one eye. My uncle took her in, protected her. It saved her life. He met Eva's gaze again. I swore that day that if I ever had the power, if I ever had the resources, I would never turn away a woman who needed help. I don't care who her husband is. I don't care what it costs me. Ricardo. You asked why I care, he said. That's why. Because I know what happens when no one cares. When everyone looks away because it's easier, because it's not their problem, his voice hardened. Your husband will never touch you again. Not while I'm breathing. That's not negotiable. Eva couldn't hold back the sob that escaped her. For 5 years, she'd been told she was worthless, that no one would believe her, that she deserved what happened. And here was this dangerous man, this crime boss everyone feared, treating her like she mattered. Treating her like she was human. Thank you, she managed through her tears. Thank you for seeing me. Ricardo finally closed the distance between them, but only to hand her his handkerchief. Get some rest, Eva. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. Jonathan will have noticed you're gone by now, and he'll be making his moves.
I'm scared. I know.
But you're not alone anymore, he guided her gently toward the door. That's the difference. As Eva returned to her room, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, she could escape the glass box after all. In his office, Ricardo returned to his chair, staring into the dying fire. He'd meant every word he'd said. Eva Steele would never be treated as less than human again. Not on his watch. The hammer fell at 9 the next morning. Eva was having breakfast in the kitchen. Maria had insisted she eat something despite her protests, when the building's security alarm chimed. Not the urgent wail of a break-in, but the steady beep that meant someone important had arrived at the front entrance. Vincent burst into the kitchen, his face grim. Boss wants you upstairs.
Now.
Don't look out any windows. Eva's stomach dropped. He's here. Not him. Worse. His lawyers. And they brought friends. Eva followed Vincent up the back stairs to Ricardo's office, her heart hammering. Through the windows, she could see what Vincent meant by friends. 3 black SUVs were parked outside, along with 2 NYPD patrol cars. At least a dozen men in expensive suits stood on the sidewalk, flanked by uniformed officers. Ricardo stood at his desk, perfectly calm, buttoning his suit jacket like he was preparing for a business meeting instead of a siege. Frank and Tommy were already there, looking tense. Stay back from the windows, Ricardo said to Eva, without looking at her. Let me handle this. Ricardo, maybe I should just... No, his tone left no room for argument. He turned to Vincent. Let them in. Conference room, not my office. I want cameras recording everything. 5 minutes later, Eva watched from a monitor in Ricardo's office as he entered the conference room where Jonathan's legal army waited. Leading them was Gerald Ashford, one of Manhattan's most feared attorneys, a man who'd successfully defended everyone from insider traders to murderers, as long as they could afford his 5-figure hourly rate. Mr. Vitale, Ashford said, his voice dripping with condescension. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I didn't agree to anything, Ricardo replied coolly, taking a seat at the head of the table like he owned the room, which, technically, he did. You showed up uninvited. There's a difference. Ashford smiled thinly and gestured to the man beside him, a police lieutenant Eva recognized from society events. Lieutenant Morrison is here as a courtesy. We're hoping to resolve this matter quietly and avoid any unpleasantness. Resolve what matter? Don't play games, Mr. Vitale. Ashford opened a leather briefcase and withdrew a stack of documents. We know Eva Steele is in this building. My client reported her missing last night. He's quite concerned for her welfare. I'm sure he is, Ricardo said dryly. Ashford slid the documents across the table. This is a court order granting Mr. Steele temporary custody of his wife due to concerns about her mental stability. We also have a warrant to search these premises for Mrs. Steele, who we believe may be a danger to herself or others. Eva's hands flew to her mouth. Even from the monitor, she could see the official seals, the judge's signature. Jonathan had worked fast. Ricardo picked up the papers, glanced at them for exactly 3 seconds, then tore them in half. The sound of ripping paper filled the room. Ashford's mouth fell open. Lieutenant Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. You just destroyed a court order, Ashford sputtered, his composure cracking. That's contempt of court, obstruction of justice. That's toilet paper, Ricardo interrupted, his voice cold as ice. A judge signed that warrant at 3 a.m. based on lies Jonathan Steele fed him. Probably the same judge who's been in Steele's pocket for years. Mr. Vitale, I strongly advise. Let me tell you how this is going to work. Ricardo stood, and despite being outnumbered, he commanded the room. Eva Steele came here seeking protection from an abusive husband. She's covered in bruises, fresh ones. She's terrified for her life. And you want me to hand her back to the man who put those bruises there? Mrs. Steele is mentally unwell, Ashford said smoothly, recovering his professional mask. Mr. Steele has documented her erratic behavior, her paranoid delusions. Documented fabrications. Ricardo cut him off. Let me guess. Steele's private physician signed off on all of it? The one on his payroll? Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward. Mr. Vitale, regardless of your personal opinions, we have a legal warrant. If you don't produce Mrs. Steele immediately, I'll have no choice but to arrest you for obstruction. Ricardo turned his full attention to the lieutenant. Let me ask you something, Morrison. How much did Jonathan Steele donate to the Police Athletic League last year? Was it $2 million or $3 million? Morrison's jaw tightened. That has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with this. Ricardo moved around the table, his presence filling the room. You think I don't know how this works? Steele throws money at every judge, every politician, every cop in the city, and suddenly his warrants get signed, his problems disappear, and everyone looks the other way while he beats his wife. These are serious allegations, Ashford warned. And without proof. I have proof. Ricardo pulled out his phone and pulled up the photos he'd taken of Eva's injuries. He tossed the phone onto the table. Scroll through those and tell me again about her mental health. Ashford's face paled as he looked at the images. Even Morrison seemed uncomfortable. But Ashford recovered quickly, the professional shark returning. Photos can be doctored. Mrs. Steele could have inflicted those injuries herself as part of her delusions. You actually believe that? Ricardo asked quietly, dangerously. What I believe is irrelevant. The law is clear. We have a court order. Your law, Ricardo interrupted, his voice dropping to something that made even the armed police officers shift nervously, doesn't apply here. Not in my building. Not when it comes to protecting a woman from the man who's been terrorizing her for 5 years. Mr. Vitale, Morrison said, his hand now actually on his weapon. You need to understand the position you're putting yourself in. This isn't about your reputation or your territory. This is about the law. Ricardo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Lieutenant, you need to understand something. Jonathan Steele might own half the politicians in Manhattan, but he doesn't own Brooklyn.
He doesn't own me.
And his money, his lawyers, his corrupt judges? They mean nothing here. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my building. You're going to tell Jonathan Steele that Eva is under my protection, and that's not changing. And if he wants her back, he's going to have to come through me. That's a threat, Ashford said, standing quickly. Witnesses heard you threaten my client. That's a promise, Ricardo corrected. My law outweighs yours, counselor. And in this borough, my word is the only one that matters. The room fell silent. It was a direct challenge, thrown down like a gauntlet. The billionaire elite versus the Mafia underworld. Money and political power against loyalty and street justice. Morrison looked genuinely torn. Mr. Vitale, if you don't comply, I'll have to arrest you. Try it, Ricardo said softly. But before you do, ask yourself how many of your fellow officers will actually back you up when word gets out that you're helping a wife-beater get his victim back. Ask yourself what happens when the press learns that Jonathan Steele's mentally unstable wife is actually a battered woman, and you tried to drag her back to her abuser at gunpoint. Morrison's hand fell away from his weapon. He was calculating, weighing his loyalty to the badge against the political firestorm that would erupt if Ricardo went public with Eva's story. This isn't over, Ashford said, gathering his ruined documents with trembling hands. Mr. Steele has resources you can't imagine. He'll come at you with everything. Let him, Ricardo replied. I've been waiting 2 years for Jonathan Steele to remember I exist. Now he's got my full attention. As the lawyers and police filed out, their faces a mixture of fury and disbelief, Ricardo returned to his office where Eva was still watching the monitor, tears streaming down her face. You just declared war, she whispered. For me. Ricardo looked at her, his expression softening for just a moment. Eva, I declared war on your husband the moment I decided to help you. This. He gestured toward the door where the lawyers had just left. This is just the opening move. What happens now? Now, Ricardo said, his voice grim. Things get worse before they get better. Steele knows he can't intimidate me with lawyers and corrupt cops. So he'll escalate. He'll use every weapon he has, the media, federal agencies, maybe worse. I'm so sorry, Eva said, her voice breaking. Don't be. Ricardo moved to his desk, already planning his next moves. You gave me something I've wanted for 2 years, a legitimate reason to take down Jonathan Steele. And I'm going to enjoy every second of it. Outside, the SUVs pulled away, carrying Jonathan's fury back to Manhattan. The first battle was over. But the war had only just begun. For 3 days, Eva barely left her room. She heard the activity downstairs, more guards being hired, security systems upgraded, phones ringing constantly as Ricardo's organization prepared for Jonathan's next move. All because of her. Maria brought meals that Eva barely touched. The bruises on her face were fading to yellow-green, but the guilt sat like a stone in her stomach, heavy and unmoving. On the 4th morning, she forced herself downstairs. The building was different now. Cameras on every corner, armed men stationed at every entrance. She counted at least a dozen new faces, all hard-eyed men who watched everything with the wariness of soldiers expecting attack. This was her fault. All of it. She found Ricardo in his office, surrounded by Tommy and Vincent, studying security reports. They fell silent when she appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I should have knocked. Don't be ridiculous, Ricardo replied, waving her in. This is your home too. Home. The word felt foreign. Homes weren't supposed to have armed guards and surveillance cameras. We'll finish this later, Ricardo told his men. After they left, he turned to Eva. You haven't been eating. I'm not hungry. Maria says you've barely touched anything in 3 days. I'm fine. Ricardo studied her for a long moment. You're not fine.
Talk to me.
Eva wrapped her arms around herself, unable to meet his eyes. I heard Tommy this morning, on the phone with one of your accountants. They're moving millions of dollars because of me. Restructuring your entire operation because my husband might come after your assets. That's just good business. It's not just good business. Eva's voice cracked. Your whole life is being turned upside down. Your men are working double shifts. You're spending a fortune on security. All because I showed up crying at your door. Eva. I'm a burden, she whispered. An expensive, dangerous burden. And the worst part is, I know you're only doing this because of your pride. Because Jonathan humiliated you, and now you want revenge. I'm just the excuse. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. When Ricardo finally spoke, his voice was controlled, but edged with something dangerous. Is that what you think? That you're an excuse? What else could I be? Eva forced herself to look at him. You don't know me. We're strangers. But you're risking everything you've built for me. It doesn't make sense unless, she swallowed hard. Unless I'm just a weapon you're using against him. Ricardo stood slowly, moving around his desk. Sit down? I'd rather stand.
Sit.
Down. It wasn't loud, but the command in his voice made her sink into the nearest chair. Ricardo leaned against his desk, arms crossed, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You want to know why I'm doing this? He asked quietly. The real reason? Yes. Because 5 years ago, when your husband humiliated me in front of 300 people, I made a choice. I could have killed him. Easily. One word, and he would have disappeared. But I didn't because I'm trying to be more than what this city thinks I am. More than just a criminal. He paused, his jaw tight. And then you showed up at my door, broken and terrified, and I saw exactly what kind of man Jonathan Steele really is. Not the philanthropist, not the business genius. A coward who hides behind money and beats women where no one can see. So it is about him, Eva said bitterly. About revenge. No, Ricardo's voice hardened. It's about you. About every woman like you who thinks she's worthless, because some man told her she was. About my mother, who stayed for 20 years because she believed no one would help her. About proving that wealth and power don't give you the right to destroy people. Eva shook her head. You don't understand. I'm nothing without him. I have no money, no education beyond a bachelor's degree in art history that's useless. No job experience. No skills. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I was raised to smile and obey. To be decorative. That's all I know how to do. That's what he taught you to believe. It's the truth. Eva stood abruptly, anger finally breaking through the shame. Look at me, Ricardo. Really look. I'm 27 years old, and I can't even order food for myself without panicking about whether I'm allowed to. I ask permission before using the bathroom. I apologize for existing. What kind of person does that? A person who survived 5 years of systematic abuse, Ricardo said firmly. A person who was broken down piece by someone who is supposed to love her. Broken.
Exactly.
I'm broken. So fix yourself, Ricardo said, and there was challenge in his voice now. You're out. You escaped. You did the hardest part, you ran. Now do the next hardest part. Believe you're worth saving. Eva laughed, but it came out as a sob. I don't know how. Ricardo moved closer, and Eva flinched despite herself. He stopped immediately, his hands visible and non-threatening. Look at me, Eva. She forced her eyes up. You're not a trophy here, he said, his voice softer but no less intense. You're not decoration. You're not a doll to be posed and displayed. You're human. A real person with thoughts and feelings and rights that nobody, not Jonathan, not anyone, gets to take away. I don't feel human, Eva whispered. I feel empty. Like all the parts that make someone a real person got scooped out years ago. Then we'll help you find them again. Ricardo's expression gentled. But first, you need to stop apologizing for being here. Stop acting like you don't deserve protection. Stop treating yourself the way Jonathan taught you to. How am I supposed to do that? Start small. Eat breakfast tomorrow, without asking if it's okay. Walk through this building without apologizing to every person you pass. Say what you want instead of what you think others want to hear. Eva wiped at her eyes. And if I can't, then you try again the next day. And the day after that, Ricardo straightened. Eva, Jonathan spent 5 years teaching you that you're worthless. It's going to take time to unlearn that. But I promise you, you're worth every second, every dollar, every risk I'm taking. Why? The word came out as a plea. Why do you care so much? Ricardo was quiet for a long moment, something flickering in his eyes that Eva couldn't read. Because someone cared enough to save my mother. And because he paused, then continued quietly. Because when I look at you, I don't see a burden. I see someone fighting like hell to survive. That's not nothing, Eva. That's everything. Eva felt something crack inside her chest, the armor she'd built around her shame, around her self-loathing. It hurt, but it also felt like she could breathe for the first time in days. I'll try, she whispered. That's all I'm asking. And Ricardo? She met his eyes. Thank you for seeing me as more than what he made me. He nodded once. Now go eat something. Maria's making pasta, and if you don't show up, she'll drag both of us into that kitchen by our ears. Eva managed a small, genuine smile. It felt strange on her face, like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. But as she left his office, she felt something else too, a tiny, fragile spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, she could be more than Jonathan's broken trophy. Maybe she could be Eva again. Whatever that meant. The attack came 6 days after Eva's arrival, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the street outside Ricardo's building seemed almost peaceful. Eva had finally started venturing to the small rooftop garden Maria maintained, a space filled with tomato plants and herbs that somehow thrived despite the Brooklyn pollution. It was the first place Eva had found that didn't feel like a cage. She could see the sky, feel the breeze, and for brief moments, remember what freedom felt like. She was watering the basil plants when she heard the commotion below.
Shouting.
Car doors slamming. Then voices calling out. Mrs. Steele. Eva Steele. Just a few questions. Eva froze, the water ink trembling in her hands. She moved to the edge of the roof and looked down at the street. 3 vans had pulled up and men were pouring out, maybe a dozen of them, all carrying cameras with oversized lenses, microphones, professional equipment. Paparazzi. The press had found her. Vincent and 2 other guards were already outside, blocking the building's entrance. "This is private property," Vincent barked. "Clear out before." "Mrs. Steele has a right to tell her story," one of the photographers shouted, his camera already clicking. "The public deserves to know the truth about her disappearance." Eva's heart hammered. This was it. Jonathan had sicked the media on her. By tomorrow, her face would be plastered across every tabloid in New York, probably with headlines about how she'd run away with a mobster, how she was unstable, unfaithful, crazy. She turned to run back inside, but stopped. Something felt wrong. The paparazzi were moving too deliberately, too coordinated. Real press would be chaotic, scrambling over each other for shots. These men moved like a unit, like soldiers. And their cameras, Eva had been photographed enough to know equipment. Those cameras were cheap knockoffs, the kind you'd grab for show, not professional work. "Get inside," a voice said behind her. Frank had appeared on the rooftop, his gun already drawn. "Now, Eva." "They're not really paparazzi, are they?" Eva whispered.
No.
"They're not." Below, the situation was deteriorating fast. The fake photographers had spread out, surrounding the building's entrance. Vincent was on his radio, calling for backup, but the paparazzi were pressing forward, their cameras abandoned now, hands reaching into jackets. "Mrs. Steele," one of them called up, and Eva saw his face clearly now, military haircut, dead eyes, a professional coldness that made her blood freeze. "Mr. Steele is very worried about you. He just wants you to come home." Eva, inside now. Frank grabbed her arm just as the first gunshot cracked through the air. Everything exploded into chaos. The fake paparazzi dropped their pretense entirely, pulling weapons and rushing Vincent's position. But Ricardo's men had been ready. More guards poured from the building, and suddenly the quiet Brooklyn street became a war zone. Frank shoved Eva through the rooftop door and down the stairs. She could hear it all. Gunfire, shouting, the crash of metal on metal. Her legs barely worked as Frank half-carried her to Ricardo's office. Ricardo was already there, barking orders into his phone, his face a mask of cold fury. When he saw Eva, something shifted in his expression. "Are you hurt?" "No, Stay here. Don't move from this room." He started past her, but Eva grabbed his arm. "Don't go out there. Please. They came for you." "Eva," his voice was deadly calm. "In my territory. To my building. That ends now." He disappeared down the stairs. Frank locked the door behind them and positioned himself by the window, gun ready. Eva stood frozen in the middle of the office, listening to the sounds of violence filtering up from below. It lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt like hours. The gunfire finally stopped, replaced by sirens in the distance. Eva moved to the window despite Frank's protests and looked down at the street. Bodies. Not dead. She could see them moving, groaning, being zip-tied by Ricardo's men. Blood stained the sidewalk. The fake paparazzi vans had their tires shot out, surrounded by Ricardo's security team. And in the middle of it all stood Ricardo, his white shirt spattered with blood that Eva desperately hoped wasn't his. He was talking on his phone, his free hand gesturing sharply. Even from up here, Eva could see the fury radiating from him. The door burst open. Eva spun around, her heart leaping into her throat, but it was just Vincent, breathing hard, a cut above his eyebrow bleeding freely. "They're down." All 12-inch. He looked at Eva. They had a van waiting around the corner. Restraints. Syringes. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was an extraction team. Eva's legs gave out. She sank into Ricardo's chair, shaking uncontrollably. "Jonathan sent them to take me." "Without a doubt," Frank said grimly. "Professional mercenaries. Probably ex-military." Your husband's not playing games anymore. Heavy footsteps on the stairs, and then Ricardo was there, blood on his clothes, fury in his eyes. He looked at Vincent. Status: 3 of ours injured, none critical. All 12 of theirs subdued. Police are 2 minutes out. Morrison's among them. I called our contacts at the NYPD. They're ready to play this our way. Good. Make sure those mercenaries talk. I want to know exactly who hired them. Ricardo's eyes found Eva. Everyone out.
Now.
Frank and Vincent exchanged glances, but obeyed, closing the door behind them. Ricardo stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Eva into his arms. She crashed into him, her whole body shaking. His shirt was damp with blood and sweat, and she could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. He held her like she might disappear, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. "You're safe now," he whispered fiercely against her hair. "You're safe. I've got you." "They were going to take me," Eva sobbed into his chest. "They were going to drug me and take me back to him." I know. Ricardo's arms tightened around her. "But they failed. They all failed. And your husband just made the biggest mistake of his life." Eva pulled back enough to see his face. There was a cut on his cheek, already bruising, and his knuckles were split and bleeding. "You're hurt." "I'm fine, Ricardo." "I'm fine," he repeated, but his voice softened. "Eva, look at me." She met his dark eyes, seeing something there that made her breath catch. Not just protectiveness. Something deeper. Something that terrified and comforted her in equal measure. "I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let him touch you again," Ricardo said quietly. "Do you understand me? There is no force on earth that will take you from here. Not lawyers, not cops, not armies of mercenaries. You
Are.
safe." Eva nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She believed him. God help her. She believed every word. Ricardo's hand moved to cup her face, his thumb gently brushing away her tears. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. The air between them felt charged, electric. But he just held her gaze, letting her see the promise in his eyes. "No one will hurt you again," he whispered. "Not while I'm breathing." Below, the sirens grew louder. The police were arriving to a scene they'd have to explain away. But up here, in Ricardo's arms, Eva felt something she'd thought she'd never feel again. Protected, valued, safe. And maybe, just maybe, something more. The headlines hit the next morning like a nuclear bomb. Eva saw them on the television in the common room, where someone had left the news running. She'd come downstairs for breakfast, finally starting to feel safe enough to move through the building freely. Then she saw her own face filling the screen. "Mafia boss kidnaps billionaire's wife," screamed the banner on New York One. Her legs went numb. "Authorities are investigating the disappearance of Eva Steele, wife of real estate mogul Jonathan Steele," the anchor said with practiced concern. Sources close to the family say Mrs. Steele was forcibly taken from her home last week by associates of Riccardo Vitali, a known organized crime figure. Mr. Steele is offering a substantial reward for any information leading to his wife's safe return. The screen cut to footage of Jonathan at a press conference. He looked devastated, eyes red-rimmed, voice breaking as he spoke. "I just want my wife back," he said, his hand trembling as he held up a photo of Eva from their wedding day. "Eva, if you can hear this, please know that I love you. Whatever they've told you, whatever they've done to you, just come home. You're safe with me. You've always been safe with me." The lie was so perfect, so convincing, that Eva felt bile rise in her throat. "Turn it off," Maria said sharply, reaching for the remote. But Eva grabbed her wrist.
No.
"I need to see." The anchor continued. Friends of Mrs. Steele describe her as troubled in recent months, with sources suggesting possible substance abuse and erratic behavior. Dr. Patricia Hammond, a noted psychiatrist, joins us now to discuss what might drive a woman to abandon her life of luxury. Eva watched in horror as a woman she'd never met analyzed her mental state on national television. We often see this in cases of what I call golden cage syndrome, Dr. Hammond said smoothly. Women married to wealthy men sometimes develop paranoid delusions about their husbands, seeking excitement or validation elsewhere. The choice of a dangerous criminal like Riccardo Vitali suggests Mrs. Steele may be experiencing a break from reality. Jesus Christ, Frank muttered from the doorway. They're crucifying you. Eva couldn't respond. She was frozen, watching her entire life being dismantled on live television. By noon, it was everywhere. Every news station, every tabloid, every gossip website. Her face was plastered across New York, sometimes the glamorous photos from charity galas, sometimes unflattering paparazzi shots that made her look unstable, disheveled. Gold digger's gambit. Did Eva Steele trade one rich man for another? Friends worry kidnapped socialite may be suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. Jonathan Steele's heartbreak. A marriage destroyed by mental illness. The stories were coordinated, vicious, and completely one-sided. Jonathan's PR machine had mobilized overnight, feeding carefully crafted lies to every outlet in the city. Eva was painted as unstable, manipulative, a troubled woman who'd either been kidnapped or had run away with a gangster in some desperate bid for attention. Former friends, society women Eva had smiled beside at 1,000 charity events, gave tearful interviews about her concerning behavior and wild mood swings. Jonathan's doctor appeared on 3 different shows, sadly confirming that yes, Mrs. Steele had been receiving treatment for anxiety and depression, though he couldn't discuss details due to patient confidentiality. The implication was clear: she was crazy. By evening, protesters had gathered outside Riccardo's building. Not many, maybe 20 people, but cameras made them look like a crowd. "Free Eva Steele," they chanted. "Bring her home." Eva watched from the window, her whole body shaking. This was worse than the mercenaries. At least bullets were honest. This was her entire existence being rewritten, her truth being buried under an avalanche of Jonathan's money and influence. "Eva," Riccardo's voice came from behind her. "Step away from the window." She didn't move. "They think I'm insane. Or a gold digger. Or both. They think what Jonathan paid them to think. Look at them." Eva gestured at the protesters below. "Regular people who actually believe I need to be rescued."
From you.
"From the one person who's actually protecting me." "Eva." "I have to go." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I have to leave. This is destroying you. Your reputation, your business, everything. And for what? For me? I'm not worth this." "Don't," Riccardo said, his voice hard. "I'm serious." Eva turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Let me go."
I'll
figure something out. Maybe if I leave the city, go somewhere Jonathan can't find me." "There is nowhere Jonathan can't find you," Riccardo interrupted. "Not with his resources. Not with every news outlet in America broadcasting your face." "Then I'll go back to him." Eva's voice broke on the words. "I'll tell everyone I was confused, that I'm sorry that." "Absolutely not. Riccardo, please. You don't understand what he's doing. This is just the beginning. He'll destroy everything you've built, everyone you care about, until there's nothing left. Let me go before it's too late." Riccardo closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He gripped her shoulders, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make her meet his eyes. "Listen to me very carefully. If you go back to him, if you walk out that door, they will tear you apart. They're already tearing me apart."
No.
"This." He gestured toward the television still playing in the background. "This is noise. Expensive noise, but still just noise. If you go back to Jonathan now, you'll be validating every lie he's told. You'll be the crazy wife who had an episode and came crawling home." And then his voice dropped. "Then he'll make sure you never leave again. The mental institution he was planning? That'll be your reality. And this time, no one will question it." Eva's breath came in ragged gasps. "So what do I do? Just hide here while the whole world thinks I'm either kidnapped or insane?" "You survive," Riccardo said fiercely. You let me handle the media war while you focus on healing, on becoming strong enough to fight back. I don't know how to fight men like Jonathan. Then learn. Ricardo's hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face, forcing her to maintain eye contact. Eva, he's winning because you're still thinking like his victim. Like the woman he spent 5 years breaking down.
But you're out now.
You're free. And freedom means fighting for yourself. I'm so tired of fighting. I know, his voice softened. I know you are. But giving up now means Jonathan wins everything. He gets to keep abusing you, keep controlling you, keep treating you like property. Is that what you want? No, Eva whispered. But I don't want to destroy you either. You're not destroying me. You're giving me a purpose. Ricardo's thumbs brushed away her tears. For 2 years, I've run this organization, made money, gained power, and for what? To prove I'm more than what people think I am? This, protecting you, fighting for you, this is the first time in years I've felt like I'm doing something that actually matters. How can you say that? Look what it's costing you. Look what it's giving me, Ricardo countered. A chance to take down a man who deserves it. A chance to prove that money doesn't make you untouchable. A chance to, he stopped, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. A chance to protect someone who needs protecting. Eva stared at him, seeing past the crime boss to the man underneath. The man whose mother had suffered for 20 years. The man who'd built an empire but still felt empty. The man who was risking everything for a stranger who'd shown up crying in the rain. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Ricardo said, and the honesty in his voice shocked her. I'm scared Jonathan will find a way to hurt you that I can't stop. I'm scared he'll turn the whole city against us. I'm scared that, he paused, that you'll start believing his lies instead of trusting yourself. What if I already do? What if part of me thinks they're right? Then that's the part of you he created. The part that needs to die so the real Eva can live. Ricardo's expression hardened with determination.
Stay. Fight.
Prove to yourself that you're more than what he made you. And let me worry about the media circus. Eva searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for regret, for any sign that he secretly wanted her gone. She found none, only fierce, unwavering conviction. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay, I'll stay. Ricardo nodded, relief flickering across his face.
Good.
Now go upstairs. Don't watch the news. Don't read anything online. Let them scream into the void. We'll respond when we're ready. As Eva headed for the stairs, her legs shaky but functional, she heard Ricardo on the phone. Tommy, I need you to find me the best PR firm in the city. One that's not afraid of getting dirty. It's time we told our side of the story. The media war was far from over. But for the first time, Eva realized she didn't have to fight it alone. 2 weeks after the media storm began, Eva woke to find a package outside her bedroom door. Inside were jeans, t-shirts, sneakers, simple, comfortable clothes in her size. No designer labels, no silk, no restrictive elegance. Just normal clothes. A note was tucked inside, written in Ricardo's sharp handwriting. Thought you might be tired of borrowed sweatpants. No gowns. No performance. Just you. Eva held a plain gray t-shirt against her chest and felt something break loose in her throat. For 5 years, Jonathan had dictated every outfit, designer gowns for galas, specific dresses for dinners, even her casual wear had to meet his standards. She'd forgotten what it felt like to wear something just because it was comfortable. She put on the jeans and a soft blue t-shirt. They fit perfectly. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, not because she looked bad, but because she looked normal.
Real.
Human. Downstairs, she found Ricardo in the kitchen with Maria, arguing good-naturedly about whether garlic belonged in marinara sauce. It's a crime against Italian cooking, Maria insisted, waving her wooden spoon threateningly. My grandmother used garlic, Ricardo countered. Are you saying my nana didn't know how to cook? Your nana was Sicilian. Different rules. They both stopped when they saw Eva. She felt suddenly self-conscious in her simple clothes, like she was dressed wrong for some occasion she didn't understand. The jeans fit, Ricardo said, a small smile playing at his lips. They're perfect. Thank you, Eva hesitated. How did you know my size? Maria's been doing your laundry for 2 weeks. She has an excellent eye. Maria sniffed. Someone had to make sure you had clean clothes. You barely have anything. Because I left everything behind, Eva said quietly. Then we'll get you more, Ricardo said simply. But nothing you don't choose yourself. Deal? Eva nodded, that strange tightness in her chest returning. Such a small thing, the right to choose her own clothes, but it felt monumental. Over the following days, Ricardo began giving Eva more freedom, more small kindnesses that added up to something significant. He showed her the rooftop garden and told her she could go there whenever she wanted, no guards hovering, no cameras watching. He cleared out a room on the second floor and filled it with art supplies after Maria mentioned Eva's degree in art history. I haven't painted in years, Eva protested when she saw the easels, canvases, and paints. So start again, Ricardo replied. Or don't. The room is yours either way. He taught her the building's security codes, so she wouldn't feel trapped. He introduced her to his men not as Mrs. Steele but as Eva, a person, not a possession. He asked her opinions on things, from what to order for dinner to whether he should expand into Queens, treating her thoughts as valuable. One afternoon, Eva was in the garden when Ricardo joined her. He'd shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, looking less like a crime boss and more like an ordinary man seeking fresh air. You're killing Maria's basil plants, he observed, watching her overwater them. I am not, Eva protested, then looked at the drooping leaves.
Oh.
I am. They like it dry. Stress makes them more flavorful. That's very Italian, Eva said, setting down the watering can. Suffering improves character. Ricardo laughed, a real laugh, not the controlled chuckle he used in business meetings. My nana used to say the same thing, usually while making me peel potatoes. You peeled potatoes? Every Sunday until I was 16. She said it built discipline. He touched one of the tomato plants gently, checking its fruit. She'd love this garden. Maria reminds me of her sometimes. Bossy, opinionated, excellent cook. Eva found herself smiling. Tell me about her. And he did. Sitting on the worn bench surrounded by herbs and vegetables, Ricardo told her stories about his grandmother, the woman who'd raised him after his mother left his father, who'd fed half the neighborhood from her tiny kitchen, who'd smacked his knuckles with a spoon when he got too cocky. She sounds amazing, Eva said. She was. Ricardo's expression softened with memory. She died when I was 22. Cancer. By then I was already in the life. She knew what I was becoming, and it broke her heart. Did she say that?
No.
She just looked at me one day and said, Ricardo, make sure you remember who you are underneath all of this. Don't let the darkness eat the light. He paused. I think about that a lot. Eva studied his profile, the strong jaw, the tired eyes, the weight he carried. I think she'd be proud of you. For this. For helping me. Maybe he turned to look at her. Or maybe she'd smack me for getting involved in a war over a woman I barely know. Do you regret it? Not even a little bit. The honesty in his voice made Eva's breath catch. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment and then Eva asked, Can I ask you something? Why did you really get into this life?
The
organized crime business? Ricardo was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, Because I was good at it. And because when you grow up with nothing, when you watch your mother get beaten and your family struggle to survive, you do whatever it takes to make sure it never happens again. He met her eyes. Power means safety. Control means protection. Or at least, that's what I told myself. And now I'm not so sure. He gestured at the garden, at the building below, at the life he'd built. I have everything I thought I wanted. Power, money, respect. But it's still just darkness. Until you showed up, bleeding and terrified, and reminded me what the power was supposed to be for. Eva's heart hammered. Ricardo, A crash from inside interrupted them. They rushed downstairs to find Frank wrestling with a large package. "Delivery," he grunted. "From your PR firm." Inside were mock-ups of their counter-campaign, photos, talking points, a strategy to fight back against Jonathan's narrative. But what caught Eva's attention was a blown-up photo of herself from years ago, before Jonathan, smiling genuinely at something off-camera. "Where did they find this?" she breathed. "Your college roommate," Tommy said, appearing with a folder. "We tracked her down. She had dozens of photos of you from before. The real you." Eva stared at the image. That girl looked happy.
Free. Alive.
She'd forgotten that person existed. "We're going to remind people who you really are," Ricardo said quietly beside her. "Not Jonathan's trophy. You." That evening, Eva returned to the art room Ricardo had set up. She stood before a blank canvas for 20 minutes, paralyzed by possibility. Then, slowly, she picked up a brush. She painted the rooftop garden, the tomato plants, the basil, the view of Brooklyn beyond. But in the center, she painted two figures sitting on the bench, just silhouettes, but clearly a man and a woman, talking like normal people, like friends. Or maybe something more. When Ricardo found her hours later, paint in her hair and on her hands, actually smiling as she worked, he felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the broken woman who'd stumbled through his door in a torn gown. This was Eva, the real Eva, beginning to emerge from underneath years of damage. "It's beautiful," he said from the doorway. Eva turned, startled, then smiled. Not the careful, practiced smile of a trophy wife. A real smile, genuine and warm. "I'd forgotten how good this feels. Painting? Creating something.
Choosing something.
Being myself," she set down her brush. "Thank you. For this room. For the clothes. For treating me like I'm capable of having thoughts and making choices." "Eva, you are capable. You always were." He stepped into the room. "Jonathan just spent 5 years trying to convince you otherwise." She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the dangerous reputation to the man who'd given her freedom in 100 small ways. "You see me," she whispered. "The real me. Not who I was supposed to be, but who I actually am." "I see someone stronger than she realizes," Ricardo said quietly. "Someone who survived hell and came out fighting." Eva laughed, but it came out as a half-sob. "I'm not fighting. I'm hiding in your building, painting pictures and killing basil plants. You're healing. That's its own kind of fighting." And suddenly, impossibly, Eva laughed. Really laughed, not from politeness or obligation, but from genuine emotion. It bubbled up from somewhere deep inside, breaking through years of careful control. Ricardo found himself smiling too, drawn to the sound of her authentic joy. For the first time in years, Eva felt like herself. Not a trophy, not a victim, just Eva. And Ricardo, watching her laugh with paint on her hands and light in her eyes, realized he was in serious trouble. Because he wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was falling for her. The emergency council meeting was called at midnight, 3 weeks after Eva's arrival. She wasn't supposed to know about it, but she'd heard the tense whispers, seen the worried faces of Ricardo's men. Something bad was happening. She crept down the back stairs in her bare feet, careful to avoid the creaky third step, and positioned herself in the alcove just outside Ricardo's conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear every word. "It's getting worse," Tommy's voice, sharp with anxiety. "Steele's lawyers have frozen 3 of our legitimate accounts. The construction business in Queens is under investigation by the IRS. 2 city contracts we've had for years just got mysteriously canceled. He's strangling us financially," Marco added.
Piece by piece.
"And it's only been 3 weeks." Eva's stomach twisted with guilt. This was her fault. All of it. "That's not all," Vincent said grimly. "I got word from our contact in the mayor's office. Steele's been making calls. Big calls. He's pushing for a full RICO investigation into our operations. He wants federal agents crawling through every business we own. Jesus Christ, someone muttered. It gets worse. Tommy's chair scraped across the floor. He's offering bounties. $500,000 to anyone who can provide information leading to our arrest. $1 million for information that puts Rico behind bars. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Eva pressed her hand over her mouth, fighting back tears. Frank spoke next, his voice weary. Boss, we've been loyal to you for 15 years. We've stood by you through territory wars, federal investigations, family feuds. But this is different. Steele's not trying to kill us. He's trying to dismantle us. Legally, financially, systematically. What are you saying, Frank? Ricardo's voice was dangerously calm. I'm saying we need to consider our options. Our options, Ricardo repeated, each word precise. Spell it out for me. Tommy took the lead. We give her back, boss. We negotiate. Tell Steele we were protecting her, that we didn't know the full situation, that we're willing to return her in exchange for him calling off his dogs. Absolutely not. Ricardo, listen. Marco started. I said no. You're not listening. Tommy's voice rose. In 3 weeks, he's cost us $12 million. $12 million. He's got federal agencies investigating us, city contracts disappearing, legitimate businesses being audited into oblivion. How much more can we afford to lose? However much it takes. That's not an answer. Tommy slammed his fist on the table. This organization has 200 people depending on it. Employees, families, people who trust us to keep them safe and fed. You're risking all of them for one woman. Watch your tone, Ricardo warned. Vincent jumped in, trying to de-escalate. Boss, we get it. You care about her. We all do. She's been through hell. But Tommy's right. Steele's not going to stop. He's going to keep coming at us until there's nothing left. Is Eva worth destroying everything we've built? Eva felt like she'd been punched. The answer should be no.
Of course the answer should be no.
She wasn't worth all of this. Yes, Ricardo said simply. She is. More silence. Eva could barely breathe. You've lost your mind, Tommy said flatly. You're thinking with your heart instead of your head, and it's going to get us all destroyed. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years, Ricardo countered. You want to know what's worth fighting for? What's worth risking everything for? It's not money. It's not territory. It's not power. Then what? Marco demanded. Doing the right thing, Ricardo said quietly. For once in my life, doing something that actually matters. Right and wrong are luxuries we can't afford, Tommy argued. We're criminals, Rico. We break the law for a living. Since when do we care about moral high grounds? Since I watched a woman show up at my door, beaten and terrified, begging for help because her billionaire husband was planning to lock her in a mental institution for the rest of her life, Ricardo's voice hardened. Since I realized that all this power, all this money, all this respect we've built, it means nothing if we can't use it to protect people who need protecting. Beautiful speech, Tommy said bitterly. But speeches don't pay bills or keep federal agents from kicking down our doors. Frank's voice cut through the tension. This is an ultimatum, Rico. We're giving you one. It's her or us. Hand Eva over to Steele or we walk. All of us. Eva's heart stopped. They were abandoning him. Because of her. You're bluffing, Ricardo said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. We're not, Tommy replied. We've discussed it. All of us. We'll give you 24 hours to make the right choice. After that, if Eva's still here, we're out. You'll be running this organization alone. You'd really do that? Ricardo asked quietly. After everything we've been through? We'd really do that, Frank confirmed, and Eva could hear the pain in his voice. Because we care about you too much to watch you destroy yourself over a woman you barely know. Sometimes loyalty means saving someone from their own bad decisions. She's not a bad decision. She's a disaster, Tommy shot back. And if you can't see that, then you're too far gone to help. Chairs scraped. Footsteps headed toward the door. Eva pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her whole body trembling. Wait, Ricardo said. His voice had changed, gone cold and absolute. Before you walk out that door, let me make something perfectly clear. If you try to take Eva from this building, if you try to force me to hand her over, if you make a deal with Steele behind my back, I will bury you next to him. Every single one of you. The footsteps stopped. That's a threat against your own men, Frank said slowly. Your own family. That's a promise, Ricardo replied, echoing the words he'd used with Jonathan's lawyers. I've protected Eva for 3 weeks, and I'll protect her for 3 more years if I have to. Alone if necessary. But no one, not Steele, not the feds, and certainly not you, is taking her from here. Not while I'm breathing. You're choosing her over us, Marco said, disbelief in his voice. Over 15 years of loyalty, over everything we've built together. For a woman you met 3 weeks ago. I'm choosing what's right, Ricardo corrected. Something I should have been doing all along. Now get out. All of you. I'll run this organization myself if I have to. The footsteps resumed, angry and final. The door opened fully, and Eva had to squeeze herself into the alcove to avoid being seen as the council members filed past, their faces grim and furious. When they were gone, she heard Ricardo's chair scrape back, a glass being filled. The sound of him drinking, then setting it down hard. She should leave. Go back upstairs before he found her eavesdropping. But her legs wouldn't move. You can come in, Eva, Ricardo called out. I know you're there. Eva's heart lurched. Slowly, she stepped into the doorway. Ricardo stood by his window, his back to her, one hand braced against the glass. How much did you hear? He asked. All of it. He nodded, unsurprised. Then you know what's at stake. They're leaving you, Eva whispered. Because of me. Your entire organization is falling apart because you won't give me back. They'll come around.
No.
They won't. Tears streamed down Eva's face. And they're right, Ricardo. I'm not worth this. I'm not worth you losing everything. Your men, your business, everything you've built. Ricardo turned to face her. His expression was weary but resolute. That's not your call to make. Then I'm making it. Eva's voice broke. I'll leave. Tomorrow. I'll disappear somewhere Steele can't find me, and you can tell your council I'm gone. You can save your organization. Eva. No one has ever chosen me over power, Eva said, the words tumbling out through her tears. Not my parents, who sold me to Jonathan to pay their debts. Not my friends, who believed his lies instead of my truth. Not anyone. But you. You're losing everything, and you still won't let me go. She crossed the room, stood in front of him, her whole body shaking.
Why?
Why would you do this for me? Ricardo looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached up and cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Because you matter, he said simply. Because every person deserves someone who'll stand up for them when the whole world is against them. Because I've spent 15 years building an empire on fear and money, and for the first time, I have a chance to build something on something real. I'm not real, Eva protested weakly. I'm broken and damaged, and you're the most real thing in my life, Ricardo interrupted. And I'm not giving that up. Not for them. Not for anyone. Eva couldn't hold back the sob that escaped her. No one had ever chosen her. No one had ever valued her more than what she could provide them. But here was this dangerous, powerful man, risking his entire world because he believed she was worth it. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You don't have to do anything, Ricardo said quietly. Just stay. Let me fight for you. That's all I'm asking. Eva nodded, unable to speak. And when Ricardo pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried, she realized something terrifying and wonderful. She was falling for him too. The videos hit the internet at dawn. Eva was still asleep when her phone, one of the burner phones Ricardo had given her, started buzzing incessantly. She ignored it at first, but then Maria knocked urgently on her door. Don't go online, Maria said, her face pale. Don't look at anything. Rico wants you to stay in your room. But it was too late. Eva's hands were already reaching for her laptop. The first video had been viewed 3 million times in 6 hours. The thumbnail showed Eva's face, tear-streaked and distorted with anguish. The title read, "The Real Eva Steele, Unstable Wife's Breakdown Caught on Camera." Eva's finger hovered over the play button. She shouldn't watch. She knew she shouldn't.
But she clicked anyway.
The video opened on their penthouse bedroom. Eva was on the floor, curled in a ball, sobbing uncontrollably. Her voice was raw, broken. "Please, Jonathan, please.
I'm sorry. I won't do it again.
Please don't lock me in here. Please." The camera was steady, clearly mounted somewhere high. Jonathan had recorded her without her knowledge. His voice came from off-screen, calm and measured. "Eva, honey, you're not well. You need help. Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" "I'm not crazy," past Eva screamed, her voice shrill with hysteria. "Stop telling people I'm crazy. Sweetheart, you just try to hurt yourself again. Look at your wrists." The camera zoomed in on Eva's arms, showing angry red marks. Eva remembered that night. Jonathan had grabbed her wrists so hard he left bruises, then photographed them as evidence of self-harm. "I didn't, you did that. You hurt me. Eva, please. You're having another episode." Jonathan's voice was so patient, so loving. To anyone watching, he seemed like a saint dealing with an unstable wife. Eva slammed the laptop shut, but it was too late. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. There were more videos. 12 in total, all expertly edited and released across every major platform. Eva screaming during arguments, carefully cut to remove Jonathan's provocations. Eva crying in therapy sessions Jonathan had forced her to attend, sessions with his personal psychiatrist who diagnosed whatever Jonathan paid him to. Eva throwing a glass at a wall in desperation, made to look like violent instability rather than 5 years of abuse finally breaking her. The internet exploded. The videos went viral within hours, shared millions of times with commentary that ranged from pitying to vicious. "This woman needs serious help, not a mob boss boyfriend. Jonathan Steele is a saint for putting up with this. She's clearly mentally ill. Riccardo Vitale is taking advantage of a sick woman. Gold digger having a breakdown because her meal ticket cut her off." By noon, every news outlet in America was playing the clips. Psychiatrists analyzed her episodes on talk shows. Former friends gave interviews expressing concern about her deteriorating mental state. Jonathan appeared on Good Morning America, looking devastated, begging Eva to come home and get help. "I still love her," he said, his voice breaking perfectly. "Despite everything, I just want my wife to be safe and healthy. Mr. Vitale, if you're watching this, please, she needs professional care, not whatever you're providing." Eva sat on her bedroom floor, watching her entire life be destroyed in real time. Every moment of pain Jonathan had recorded, every breakdown he'd engineered and filmed, all of it now public, twisted into proof of her insanity. She barely registered Riccardo entering her room until he was kneeling in front of her.
"Eva.
Look at me." She couldn't. She was drowning, suffocating under the weight of millions of people watching her most vulnerable moments and judging her, condemning her, calling her crazy. "You should send me away," she whispered. "To a hospital. Somewhere quiet."
He's right.
"I am crazy."
No.
"You're not." "You saw the videos." Eva finally looked at him, her eyes hollow. "Everyone has seen them now. 12 million views and counting. The whole world watched me fall apart. The whole world watched Jonathan's carefully edited lies," Riccardo corrected firmly. "Those videos are taken out of context, cut, and manipulated to show what he wanted people to see. But those were real moments." Eva's voice cracked. "That was me, screaming and crying and acting like a woman being systematically abused and gaslit for 5 years. Riccardo interrupted. "Eva, do you know what I saw in those videos? A crazy woman." "No," he gripped her shoulders, forcing her to maintain eye contact. "I saw a woman being pushed past her breaking point. I saw someone fighting to hold on to reality, while her husband recorded her pain and told her she was imagining it. I saw bravery, not madness." Everyone thinks I'm insane. Everyone is watching edited footage designed to make you look insane. There's a difference. Ricardo's jaw was tight with fury. Jonathan recorded you at your lowest moments, moments he created, and now he's using them as weapons. That's not evidence of your mental illness. That's evidence of his cruelty. Eva shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It doesn't matter what the truth is. The damage is done. My face is everywhere, everyone has seen me at my worst, and they all think she couldn't finish the sentence. They think what Jonathan wants them to think. For now, Ricardo pulled her closer. But we're going to fight back. Tommy's already working with our PR firm. We're going to release your medical records from before you met Jonathan, clean bill of mental health. We're going to get statements from people who knew you in college. We're going to show context for every single one of those videos. It won't work. His narrative is already out there. Then we'll create a better one. Ricardo's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. Eva, listen to me. This is what he does. He takes your worst moments and uses them to control you. He made you believe you were worthless, that no one would ever believe you, that you deserved what he did. Maybe I do deserve it. Stop. Ricardo cupped her face in his hands. You're not broken, Eva. He is. A real man doesn't record his wife's pain to use as ammunition later. A real man doesn't gaslight and abuse someone until they break, then film the breaking and call it proof of insanity. But everyone believes him. Eva sobbed. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. Even your counsel thinks you're insane for protecting me. I don't care what anyone thinks, Ricardo said fiercely. I know the truth. I see who you really are. Not these manufactured moments of crisis, but the woman who paints in the morning, who laughs at Maria's stories, who's been fighting like hell to reclaim herself despite everything he did. Eva wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But the videos played on loop in her mind, her own voice screaming, her own face contorted with anguish, proof of every horrible thing Jonathan had ever said about her. He's winning, she whispered. He's destroying both of us, and he's winning. Not yet, he's not. Ricardo stood, pulling Eva up with him.
Get dressed.
We're holding a press conference.
What? No.
I can't. Yes, you can. Ricardo's expression was determined. Jonathan wants to humiliate you publicly?
Fine.
We'll respond publicly. You're going to stand in front of those cameras and tell your truth.
No edits.
No manipulation. Just you being honest about what he did. I can't do that. I'll fall apart. Then fall apart, Ricardo said gently. Fall apart honestly, in front of people who'll see its real emotion, not manufactured hysteria. Eva, the only way to beat his narrative is to give people yours. Show them the woman I see. Scared but brave, hurt but healing, real and human, and nothing like the edited clips he's selling. Eva stared at him, terrified but also something else. Hopeful, maybe. Or just desperate enough to try. What if I mess up? What if I prove him right? You won't. Ricardo pulled her close, his arms solid and steady around her. Because you're not the broken doll he tried to make you. You're Eva. And it's time the world met the real you. Eva buried her face in his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek. He still believed in her. Even after watching those horrible videos, even with his entire organization abandoning him, even with the whole world calling her crazy, he still believed she was worth fighting for. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. That's my girl, Ricardo murmured against her hair. And despite everything, despite the videos, despite the humiliation, despite the fear, Eva felt something fierce and determined kindle in her chest. Jonathan wanted to destroy her publicly?
Fine.
She'd fight back publicly. She'd show the world who she really was, and who he really was. And she wouldn't do it alone. She had Ricardo. And somehow, that made all the difference. The press conference was scheduled for 6 p.m., prime time viewing. Every major network would be there. Ricardo's PR team had spent 48 hours preparing, but the real work had been done by Eva herself. She'd given them everything. The journals she'd hidden in her old apartment, years of entries documenting every beating, every threat, every time Jonathan had twisted reality until she questioned her own sanity. Medical records from emergency room visits she'd made under false names, claiming she'd fallen or walked into doors, each one timestamped and photographed. Bank statements showing Jonathan's complete financial control. Emails from her parents choosing his money over her safety. And the recordings. Eva had started secretly recording their fights 6 months ago, desperate to prove to herself that she wasn't imagining the abuse. Hours of audio capturing Jonathan's true voice, cold, cruel, nothing like the loving husband he played on television. "You ready?" Ricardo asked, straightening his tie in the mirror. He looked every inch the powerful businessman in his tailored suit, not the mob boss the media painted him as. Eva stood in a simple navy dress, professional, modest, chosen specifically to counter Jonathan's narrative of her as unstable and attention-seeking. Her hands shook as she smoothed the fabric. "I don't know if I can do this." Ricardo crossed to her, taking both her trembling hands in his. "You survived 5 years with him. You escaped. You're still standing. This." He nodded toward the door, where dozens of cameras waited. "This is just telling the truth. And the truth doesn't need to be performed. It just needs to be spoken. What if no one believes me?" "They will." His confidence was absolute. "Because we have proof. Real proof, not edited videos. And because when you speak, people will see what I see, someone who's been through hell and came out telling the truth." The conference room was packed. Journalists from every major outlet, cameras from networks around the world, the low hum of anticipation that comes before something explosive. As Eva entered with Ricardo at her side, the room fell silent. She could see the judgment in their eyes. These people had watched Jonathan's videos. They thought they knew who she was: crazy, unstable, manipulative. Her stomach churned, but Ricardo's hand on the small of her back steadied her. "Thank you all for coming," Ricardo began, his voice commanding the room. "I'm going to make a brief statement, and then Eva will speak for herself. No interruptions, no questions until she's finished." "Understood." The journalists nodded, pens poised over notebooks. 3 weeks ago, Eva Steele came to me seeking protection from her husband, Jonathan Steele. She was bruised, terrified, and convinced that if she went back, she would either be killed or institutionalized. I agreed to protect her. Not because of some romantic entanglement as the media has suggested, but because it was the right thing to do. He paused, letting that sink in. Jonathan Steele is a billionaire with tremendous influence. He's used that influence to paint his wife as mentally unstable, to leak private videos designed to humiliate her, and to wage a systematic campaign to force her back into his control. Today, we're presenting evidence that tells a very different story. Ricardo nodded to his team. Large screens flickered to life behind them, showing the first document, a medical report from Mount Sinai Hospital, dated 2 years ago. Eva's name, a list of injuries: fractured rib, severe bruising, concussion. "This is one of 7 emergency room visits Eva made over 5 years," Ricardo continued. 7 times, she sought medical treatment for injuries her husband inflicted. Each time, she lied about how it happened because Jonathan threatened to destroy her if she told the truth. The screens cycled through more records. Each one showed a pattern: injuries consistent with domestic violence, documented but never reported. Eva watched the journalists' faces change. The skepticism was still there, but something else too.
Doubt.
Curiosity. The beginning of understanding. "Now Eva will speak," Ricardo said, stepping aside. "And I'm going to ask that you listen with the same attention you gave to Jonathan's edited videos." Eva stepped up to the microphone. Her prepared speech sat on the podium in front of her, but suddenly she didn't need it. She looked out at the cameras, at the people who'd watched her humiliation, and found her voice. "My name is Eva Steele," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "And for 5 years, I was my husband's prisoner." The room leaned in, hanging on every word. "Jonathan didn't kidnap me with force. He did it with money, with isolation, with control so complete that I forgot I was a person with rights. He chose my clothes, my friends, my schedule. He controlled every dollar I spent, every place I went, every word I spoke in public. Her voice grew stronger. And when I disagreed with him, when I showed any independence, he punished me. Not always with his fists, though that happened too. Sometimes with silence, with threats, with reminding me that no one would ever believe me over him. She gestured to the screens. Those videos he released? Those were my worst moments. Moments when I was breaking under the weight of his abuse. He recorded them not out of concern, but as insurance. As proof that I was crazy if I ever tried to leave. Eva's hands gripped the podium. But I'm not crazy. I'm traumatized. There's a difference. And I'm done being ashamed of my trauma. She reached for the folder Ricardo had prepared. This is my journal from 3 years ago. I'm going to read one entry. Just 1 inch. She opened to a page marked with a yellow tab. November 14th. Jonathan broke 2 of my ribs tonight because I laughed at another man's joke at the charity gala. He says I embarrassed him. I can barely breathe, but I can't go to the hospital because he'll know I went. I'll wait 3 days, then go to a clinic in Queens and say I fell. He's watching me write this. I have to hide it. I have to remember this is real. I'm not crazy. This is real. Her voice broke, but she pushed through. I have 3 years of entries like that. 3 years of documenting my own abuse because I was so gaslit, so broken, that I needed proof for myself that it was happening. She looked directly into the camera. Jonathan Steele is not the victim here. He's not the concerned husband trying to save his unstable wife. He's an abuser with unlimited resources, using every tool at his disposal to force me back under his control. The room was dead silent. I'm not perfect, Eva continued. I've made mistakes. I've had breakdowns. I've screamed and cried, and probably looked insane doing it. But I did those things because I was being systematically destroyed by a man who was supposed to love me. She stepped back from the microphone. That's all I have to say. The room erupted, journalists shouting questions, cameras flashing. But Ricardo was already there, stepping between Eva and the chaos, his arm around her shoulders, shielding her. One more thing, Ricardo said, his voice cutting through the noise. The room quieted. We're releasing all of this evidence, the medical records, the journal entries, the audio recordings, to the public. Everything Jonathan tried to hide, everything he threatened Eva to keep secret. You want the truth? Here it is. All of it. He looked directly into the nearest camera. Jonathan Steele, you wanted a public battle? You've got one. But this time, the truth is coming out. All of it. As Ricardo led Eva off the stage, the room exploded again. But this time, the questions were different. This time, they were directed at Jonathan's narrative, at his lies, at the holes in his perfect story. Outside, Eva collapsed against the wall, adrenaline leaving her system in a rush. She'd done it. She'd spoken her truth in front of the entire world. You were incredible, Ricardo said, pulling her close. I was terrified. You were both, he smiled. But you did it anyway. That's courage. Within the hour, the story had shifted. News outlets were re-examining Jonathan's videos with new context. Social media erupted with support for Eva. The hashtag #BelieveEva was trending worldwide. And somewhere in Manhattan, in his pristine penthouse, Jonathan Steele watched his carefully constructed image crumble on live television. The perfect husband, the concerned philanthropist, the victim, all of it falling apart, exposed for the lie it had always been. Eva had fought back, and, against all odds, people were starting to listen. The fallout was swift and devastating for Jonathan. Within 24 hours of the press conference, 3 major business partners pulled their investments. The Attorney General announced an investigation into Jonathan's finances and potential witness tampering. 2 women came forward with their own stories of abuse from relationships with Jonathan before Eva. The charity foundation that bore his name issued a statement distancing themselves from him. But the most satisfying moment came 3 days later, when the police arrived at Jonathan's penthouse with an arrest warrant. Assault, false imprisonment, coercion. The charges kept mounting as Eva's evidence was reviewed by prosecutors who could no longer ignore what was staring them in the face. Eva watched the news coverage from Ricardo's office, seeing Jonathan in handcuffs for the first time. He looked smaller somehow, less powerful. Just a man who'd built an empire on cruelty and lies, and watched it crumble when the truth came out. "How do you feel?" Ricardo asked, standing beside her. Eva considered the question. "Free," she said finally, terrified and exhausted and still processing everything, but free. A knock on the door interrupted them. Frank entered, followed by Tommy, Vincent, Marco, and the rest of the council. They'd been absent since the ultimatum, but now they filed in silently, their expressions unreadable. Eva tensed. This was it. They'd come to collect on their threat, to force Ricardo to choose. Frank spoke first. "We saw the press conference, and..." Ricardo's voice was carefully neutral. "And we were wrong." Tommy stepped forward, looking uncomfortable, a rare expression on the hardened accountant. "About her. About what she meant. About what this fight was really about." "We thought you were being reckless," Vincent added, choosing pride over good business. But watching her up there, seeing that evidence, he shook his head. "That took real courage. Both of you." Marco cleared his throat. "We came to apologize. To you and to Eva. We judged without knowing the full story." Eva's breath caught. These men, these dangerous, powerful men, were apologizing to her. "We're back," Frank said simply, looking at Ricardo. "If you'll have us. The organization stands with you. With both of you." Ricardo's expression softened with relief and something deeper. Forgiveness, maybe, or gratitude. "We're family. Family fights sometimes. But family comes back." The council members nodded, and one by one, they approached Eva. Each offered a respectful nod, a quiet word of apology. She accepted them all, feeling something shift in the room, from judgment to acceptance, from outsider to something else. After they left, Ricardo turned to Eva. "There's one more thing we need to do. One more public statement. I thought we were done with press conferences." Not quite. His eyes held that intensity she'd come to recognize, the look that meant he was about to do something that would change everything. "Trust me?" An hour later, Eva found herself back in front of cameras, but this time the setting was different. Not a sterile conference room, but the steps outside Ricardo's building. The press had gathered again, but so had something else. A crowd of supporters, people holding signs that read, "We believe Eva," and "Abuse has no price tag." Ricardo stepped up to a makeshift podium, Eva beside him. His council stood behind them, a united front. The cameras rolled. 3 weeks ago, Ricardo began, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Eva Steele came to me seeking protection. She was terrified, broken, and convinced no one would help her. I made her a promise that day, that she would be safe under my roof. Today, I'm making a new promise. A public 1-inch." He turned to face Eva, taking her hands in his. Her heart hammered. "The world has spent weeks debating whether you're a victim or a gold digger, whether you're sane or unstable, whether you're worth protecting." His voice hardened. "But none of that matters. Because they never asked the right question." "What's the right question?" Eva whispered. Ricardo addressed the cameras again, his voice ringing with conviction. "Not what is Eva worth, but who gets to decide that?" Jonathan Steele treated her like a trophy, something to display, to control, to own. Society did the same, judging her value by her appearance, her marriage, her perceived stability. He turned back to Eva, and his expression was so full of emotion it made her breath catch. But she was never his trophy. She was never society's to judge. She is her own person, strong, brave, and worthy of respect, not because of who she's married to or what she looks like, but because she's human. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A mafia boss, standing before the world, declaring a woman's inherent worth. It defied everything people expected. Ricardo's voice dropped, intimate despite the cameras, meant for Eva alone, even as the world listened. She is mine to protect, to respect, to love. Not because I own her, no one owns her, but because she chose to trust me, and I choose to stand beside her. Always. Eva felt tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of pain anymore. They were tears of joy, of relief, of finally being seen, truly seen, for who she was. I love you, Eva, Ricardo said quietly. Not the trophy Jonathan tried to make you. Not the broken victim you thought you were. But the real you. The woman who paints in the morning, who laughs at Maria's stories, who survived hell and came out fighting. That woman. I love her. Eva didn't care about the cameras, didn't care about the world watching. She threw her arms around Ricardo, holding him tight as the crowd erupted in cheers. I love you too, she whispered against his neck. You saved my life. No. Ricardo pulled back just enough to see her face. You saved your own life. I just gave you a safe place to do it. When they finally pulled apart, Eva turned to face the cameras. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't afraid of being seen. Ricardo took her hand, and together they walked down the steps, through the crowd of supporters, cameras flashing around them. Eva walked with her head held high, her shoulders back, her hand firmly in Ricardo's. Not behind him like a subordinate, not ahead like a prize. Beside him, equal, partners. She was no longer Jonathan's trophy. No longer a doll in a glass box. No longer broken glass waiting to cut someone. She was Eva. Just Eva. And that was more than enough. The cameras captured it all. This woman who'd been broken and rebuilt, who'd fought her way back from nothing, walking confidently into her future beside a man who'd risked everything to prove she was worth saving. It shocked everyone who'd once dismissed her as nothing more than a pretty ornament. But most of all, it shocked Eva herself. Because she'd finally discovered something Jonathan had tried to destroy, her own strength, her own voice, her own worth. And no one, not Jonathan, not society, not anyone, could ever take that away again.